All right, everybody, welcome to this lovely Tuesday webinar on travel insurance. I have to think of the day. We are joined by Christina and Tara from World Nomads, a travel insurance company I've been using since I've been traveling. So like 20 years from now. So years, not from now. It's for 20 years. It's evening here. They're going to talk to us about travel insurance as well as comparing coverage from credit cards and travel insurance because this is a question I get a lot. Um, and it should be on your screen. The company is World Nomads Travel Insurance, Australian based, and as well as what do you do with natural disasters and um, how do you prepare for that when you buy insurance and what are the legalities of all that, because there's always stuff. I'm going to toss it to them. Again, save your questions to the end. We will have plenty of time for questions. This webinar is being recorded. So you will get a copy of this webinar tomorrow. So if you miss something or don't take notes quickly enough or need to see your slide again, you'll get it all tomorrow. So with that, I will hand it off to Tara and Christina and let them teach us some cool stuff.
Thank you, Matt. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here. My name is Tara Bakall, and Christina Tunna is with us as well today. We're both from World Nomads Travel Insurance, and we're very excited to take you through how to stay ready for whatever the world throws your way, specifically related to travel plans. So as Matt mentioned, we're going to get into an overview of what is travel insurance and a comparison to walk through the differences between travel insurance, add-on travel protection, and credit card coverage. This is a frequently asked question that we get from a lot of our customers, as well as just comes up in conversation. So do want to dive into some of those key differences. And then we'll take you through some traveler scenarios. So common kind of events that can impact travel, like storms and injuries while you're traveling. And so we're going to talk about some safety tips as well as how travel insurance can help during those kind of scenarios. We'll do a quick introduction to World Nomads and then save some time, about 15-20 minutes at the end for a Q&A. So make sure to jot down any questions that you have throughout the presentation. So I'll kick it over to Christina. She's going to take us through our first topic. What is travel insurance?
Thank you, Tara, and hello, everybody. Um, I get asked this question. Matt just said he gets asked this question a lot. I think most people in the industry or who are travelers also ask themselves the question of, well, what is travel insurance and should I get it? So I always start with the basics of what is travel insurance in its simplest form. And also there's a lot of terminology too, trip insurance, trip protection, travel insurance, non-insurance services, etc. We'll get into those details later. But in its most simplest form, travel insurance is intended to give you a little bit of a peace of mind, right? In the event that something goes wrong. Um, and it gives you the protection against any financial loss that you might have as a result of that event creating an issue in your travels, whether it be before you travel or on your trip. So there's two ways to look at this as well, is what am I protected against financially before I even depart? And then what am I protected against something that might happen while I'm on my trip? It is also about giving you that assistance, attendance, and financial coverage for medical emergencies. Those medical emergencies are on-trip types of coverages. And then also giving you that assistance 24/7 in any language anywhere in the world. So making sure that when you, as an outbound traveler, whether you're a US outbound or anywhere else, that if you are in another country where you do not speak the language, that assistance desk is there intended to help you get what you need, whether it be to a hospital or with lost luggage, etc., with local language capabilities and helping you bridge potential gaps in that area. The way I've always liked to communicate it, and certainly when I entered into the insurance category and insurance industry, in my head, it was very simple for me to remember insurance as it covers you. So your physicality, whether it be emergency medical, emergency dental pain, and or emergency evacuation. And we'll get to some scenarios where emergency evac could be a part of a consideration. It covers your stuff. And I always point down to a luggage bag on the ground, right? So it covers your baggage, the things that you own, whether that baggage and belongings are delayed, whether those baggage and in some cases sports equipment is damaged in transit, or if there is theft of your belongings. And then the third part is I always point to my pocket, your investment, right? So the monies that you have shelled out to make your trip happen. So things that might incur a loss of that trip monies because you have to cancel your trip before you go, or a loss, financial loss of your investment because you've had to interrupt your trip while you're on that trip. Or if your trip is delayed, you can't quite get to your destination for various delays that might happen on the way. And then some of the investment protections that come through things like an optional cancel for any reason benefit. So think of it in those three ways, and it'll play into later on in this presentation as to what matters most to you across these three broad categories of how to think about insurance. So some of the common questions that we get about travel insurance, I'm sure we'll get a lot more deeper into the conversation through the chat. And certainly Matt can also pepper with some of the common questions. By the way, we also have a lot of FAQs on our website that help probably mirror what a lot of you are also thinking about in terms of your questions. But let's jump into this particular slide. So there's different types of travel insurances out there, right? So some of the questions that I get asked a lot by my friends and network are, there's trip protection, there's comprehensive, there's pre-departure only, post-departure only. There's all these different ways of casting this financial protection. One of them is comprehensive. And so sometimes you have to be careful with how you use the word comprehensive because it might suggest to a regulator in a given country that you cover everything. So we always like to say it's bundled, meaning it covers those three categories that I mentioned in the earlier slide. So bundled insurance. Then there's trip cancellation only coverage, which is exactly what it says on the tin, is you're only protecting your investment should you have to cancel your trip before you even depart. There are plans and products out there that only cover that piece of your travel planning. Then there's only medical and healthcare while you're overseas. Some of those have subcategories as well, where it's medical emergency only. And then there's also healthcare, which could be some of the ongoing healthcare needs that you have, where that's covered, particularly for those people who are traveling for a lengthy period of time. And let's say they have a pre-existing medical, such as asthma, right? We get that one once in a while for young travelers doing semester abroad, right? That's healthcare while you're overseas. It's not necessarily an emergency, but it's just making sure that you're healthy when you're on the road. Those are different products. Then there's the annual multi-trip, which again is exactly what it says on the tin. Some people refer to it as AMT, multi-trip coverage, et cetera, et cetera. But those are plans that cover you for all your ins and outs of your home country for a period of 12 months. So you can come and go if you're US based as many times as you need to, and that one plan will cover that trip. I can't remember if we get into details on the annual multi-trips, so I'll flag them now. Some annual multi-trips will vary on whether they cover you for a maximum trip length, by which you have to come back to your home country. So look out for those in your annual multi-trip plans where you might see 30-day max or 45-day max per trip. And also if the benefit limits are an aggregate for the year or are benefits per trip. Got to look out for those subtle nuances. Then there's a single trip, which is I'm just going to France for 3 weeks and I'm coming back. Or group travel coverages, which is everybody is covered with the exact same benefits. And usually group travel, it tends to be a requirement for those people who are leaving from the same departure point and returning back to that point. It can be a little bit unwieldy if you're meeting a bunch of people in Mexico City and people are coming from New York, Toronto, and Paris to meet you there. There probably would not be one plan that covers all of you in that group. And we can get into the weeds of that, but very unlikely. I've never seen it. And then there's expat coverage, which typically it tends to weight itself for, if you're a digital nomad or you're doing a work assignment for 3 months in a given country, those coverages tend to be cast very differently and might lean a little bit more heavily towards healthcare while you're overseas, again, for those pre-existing known conditions. And they have very different coverages and very different purposes for the type of travel that you might be doing. Um, so when should you buy travel insurance? We always recommend as soon as you've made an investment in your travel arrangements, whether it be that first flight that you've done, or you've booked a hotel, or you've secured your tour dates. As soon as you have that information, we suggest you buy insurance as close to that as possible. Couple of the benefits would be that your coverage starts within the terms of that contract. And even if you're paying for something 6 months from now, if you bought your insurance within a week or so of having made that initial investment, you could not be leaving for 6 months. Your coverages will be effective for that particular trip cancellation pre-departure benefit up until that date of departure. If you wait until 2 days before you leave, you've lost the opportunity to have coverages in the run up to your date of departure. And you're now self-insuring yourself should something happen to you or a close traveling member or a death in the family potentially. And you're leaving that open to the possibility and you're being exposed to that risk and self-insuring it. Basically, you got to pay for those losses yourself in terms of having to cancel your trip. So try and make the daylight between your initial deposit of a trip and the purchase of insurance as close together as possible. If you leave too much daylight, that bit in the middle is uninsured. Here we are on the slide. So what it could cover before and during the travel. So before your trip, by doing it closely, you're getting a long runway of trip cancellation due to the covered events in your plan. And again, it depends on the plan that you're looking at, but it's not limited to things like natural disaster, that might result in damage to your booked accommodations. They're not inhabitable. And certainly if that natural disaster renders your current home as not inhabitable as well. So those are potentially reasons. Sickness and accidents that could happen before your trip, right? So going away in 6 months' time, you think hunky dory, I'll leave the insurance until closer to the time. But 2 months later, you break your leg, that puts you in a cast and you can't depart. Oopsie, you have to cover the loss of that trip yourself because you didn't get insurance. So pre-departure benefits. And there's others out there as well. You've got to look at the plan, but those are sort of the most typical. And then during your trip, it covers you should there be a covered event that happens on your trip and you therefore have to interrupt. Death of a family member, you have to interrupt to go back. Or you get injured and unfortunately you cannot continue with your trip. You have to return back to your country. Loss of baggage as well, or your personal effects is another covered area. Again, your stuff that's being covered. I've talked about it a little bit before. If a natural disaster occurs when you're on your trip and your booked accommodation is rendered uninhabitable, and you don't have an alternate arrangement by maybe a travel provider who can do that for you, then there's conversations that you would have with the assistance company to understand what you can do and how you minimize the loss of that investment. And then, of course, sickness and accidents. And a topic that doesn't happen very often, but dismemberment or death when you're on a carrier on your trip.
Thank you, Christina.
You bet. Go ahead, Tara.
All right, I will get into the coverage comparison now. So this is a question we get a lot. What's the difference between travel insurance, add-on travel protection, and credit card coverage? So I'm going to cover this in the next couple of slides, and I think that as a good starting point, we'll talk about definitions for each one of those, so you have a good idea of what we're talking about for each category. So travel insurance, in this instance, what I'm talking about is a standalone policy, a bundled policy from an insurance company. And this is purchased separately from travel bookings. So if you purchase a flight through a specific airline and then you book a hotel through that hotel brand, you could buy a travel insurance separately through a company like World Nomads. The add-on travel protection is typically offered by travel suppliers like airlines, cruises, tour operators, when actually booking that specific that booking. So this is an example here that I have from a flight booking. So you might notice the checkbox when you're about to pay for a flight or for an accommodation, and it says, yes, I want to add the protection plan. This is what we call add-on travel protection. And then lastly, the credit card coverage is built into some credit cards, not all credit cards. And it does vary based on the provider and the specific kind of tier that you have. It's mainly premium travel cards. So I've noticed that there's coverage in Amex cards, Capital One, and then I have an example here, the Chase Sapphire card. All right, and so I've pulled some important elements that a lot of travelers look to when considering travel insurance plans and which one is best for them. So we'll just do a run through of some of these elements and keep in mind that this does vary based on your provider. So whether it's a travel insurance provider, the specific travel supplier that you might be getting add-on travel protection from, or even the credit card, it does vary pretty widely in terms of the different benefits that you can get. Hence the reason we always recommend that you read the policy that's coming along with any of these kind of categories. So the first one is cost. This is always top of mind for a consumer. So when it comes to a standalone travel insurance policy, it is an extra cost. It varies depending on the level of coverage that you're getting, but typically it's anywhere from 4 to 8% of your trip. An add-on travel protection is an extra cost, but it's typically pretty low cost. The coverage is typically just for that travel supplier. So I don't have an exact percentage of the trip, but it's in the lower side of the spectrum. And then with a credit card travel plan, it's typically no additional cost. I think the caveat here is typically with these kind of like premium travel cards, you are paying an annual fee. The good news is there's no additional cost on top of that fee for the travel insurance coverage that you might be getting offered through that card. In terms of what kind of travel providers are covered under each plan, so travel insurance does typically cover multiple travel providers, meaning if you needed to file a claim for something like trip cancellation, you're not able to make your trip for a covered reason, you could get reimbursed for the non-refundable costs that you've already invested in multiple travel suppliers. So for your flights, your separate accommodations, separate activities or tours. With an add-on travel protection plan, no, you don't get coverage for multiple different travel providers. It's typically just for that one travel provider that you're booking with. So if you're booking a flight and you're adding on that travel protection, the travel protection is just for that flight. And with credit card coverage, similar to travel insurance, yes, it typically does cover multiple travel providers. In terms of who is covered, again, this varies depending on the type of plan. Christina did a really good job of kind of outlining all the different options with a bundled travel insurance plan, but it can be for a solo traveler, it can be booked for a family, a couple, in some cases, even for an entire group. So there is a lot of flexibility there with a travel insurance plan. Add-on travel protection would just be for any of the travelers on the booking. Credit card coverage can vary. A lot of times, what we see in market is it's just for the single card holder. However, I have heard of more recently some of these credit cards have opened up and they're allowing for some coverage for family and couples as well. So again, important to read the fine print there. So let's move into some of the benefits that you could get under all of these different categories of travel insurance. So the first one that I wanted to touch on is trip cancellation. This is typically top of mind for a lot of travelers, especially when you're investing a lot of money into your trip. You want to make sure that there is a backup plan in case something happens, you're not able to go, or maybe you're interrupted halfway through that trip. So with trip cancellation, yes, under a travel insurance plan and a bundled plan, you typically do have trip cancellation benefits. And how it works is you would get a cash reimbursement for non-refundable costs if you had to cancel for a covered reason. So say you were injured a week before your trip and your doctor says you cannot go on this trip, that would be a covered reason that you could get reimbursed for, say, your flight that you've already booked, your accommodations, any tours. Add-on travel protection, yes, there is trip cancellation. Essentially, that is the product that is that kind of add-on travel protection for a flight or for a accommodation. And the way that you can get paid out, it varies depending on, the exact kind of provider. Sometimes it's a cash refund, credits, vouchers. It really just depends, and important to, understand that before you check that box. Credit card coverage, so similar to travel insurance, yes, you can get trip cancellation benefits. The type of benefits and events vary depending on that card, but oftentimes this is a cash reimbursement as well. So moving on to emergency medical benefits under a bundled travel insurance plan, yes, there are often emergency medical benefits, as well as you can also get 24/7 emergency assistance and sometimes emergency evacuation. Add-on travel protection does not typically offer this kind of coverage. Credit card coverage can include it, but it's often very limited. Again, this is going to vary from card to card, so important to understand before you go on that trip. And then last category here is adventure activities. And this can vary. It can be something as kind of like a soft activity like taking a 1 mile hike, or it could be something more adventurous like scuba diving or skiing. So important to know that there are exclusions sometimes with travel insurance policies for those activities, no matter, if they're soft activity or maybe more risky. With a travel insurance policy, yes, typically these can be covered with World Nomads, certainly. We do have coverage for adventure activities. Add-on travel protection, no. And even with credit card coverage, it can be limited, and oftentimes there are exclusions for these kind of activities. So I think this brings us to the question, how do I find the right plan for me? So if Christina, if you can help me answer this question, because I know we just gave a lot of information about travel insurance, but how do we kind of dial that and understand how it kind of fits to each consumer decision?
Yeah, so there's no such thing as a one size fits all insurance plan. Yes, you can go to lots of different provider sites and see this one plan. And what you look into that plan could be very different for what's important for me in that same plan. And so I always give advice to people. In fact, this was last week, and it's an example where someone was asking me about insurance for the trip he's taking with his wife and early 20s son. And I said, I can tell you what I would pick, but you've got to figure out what's most important to you. So if you care more about your investment in your trip and you're really worried about something happening that you lose that deposit or you lose, your full investment, then I always suggest focus on that part of the insurance plan that you're considering and get really familiar with the types of events. Is it a named peril, which means the plan names what is covered, or is it an open peril, which means it covers everything with exceptions that are listed, right? So different insurers go at it in a different way. They're going to name what you're covered for, or they're not going to name anything, but they'll list exceptions. So that's very important. But if that matters to you, go to that part of the plan. If you're more worried about a medical circumstance, whether it be a traveling partner is sick and you're worried, like, what if they get sick and we can't go? Or what if something happens to my parents? Or what if something happens to me when I'm on the trip? Focus on that part of the plan, right? Look at the health and the medical aspects of the plan. If you're worried about your stuff, right? You're a photographer, you've got all this really great gear, or you're a digital nomad, you've got all your laptops. Um, Find out in that particular part of the plan what's going to be most important for you. One big call out is if you're an adventure traveler and you're bringing your own gear, most insurers will look very carefully in that plan. Most insurers will say we'll only cover damage to that gear or theft, loss of that gear if it happens while it's in the common carrier, right? So most insurers won't cover it for you shredding the slopes with your skis and doing a real number on them. They're not going to cover for that, right? So again, what's important to you, your health, your stuff, or your pocket, focus on that part of the plan to figure out if it's the right fit for you. Or if from a basic standpoint, it's a good plan and there's additional add-ons that you could say, well, it doesn't cover this thing of my concern. So I'm going to see if there's an add-on, optional add-on that will then alleviate my concerns around that specific coverage. Um, I know that no one really sets out to look at a plan and read it in its entirety and be excited about that prospect. But I really do encourage you to take the 5 or 10 minutes, again, focusing on the priority for you, and just understand, is that maximum benefit payout based on conditionalities? Is it something that will be per trip for an annual multi-trip? Is it per trip or aggregate for the year? Right? Really understand what the payouts and the limits are and the exceptions to that payout. Think about also, does your destination or your adventure activity that you're planning to do, or if there's an exclusion for a known event. We talk a little bit further down on hurricanes. So if everybody knows that that's something that impacts your travel, and then you buy your insurance, that's not going to happen. You don't buy home insurance after you see the fire on your house, right? That's sort of common sense. It extends to travel as well. You're not going to be covered for something that we already know has happened. Also be familiar with the plan of, is routine healthcare part of my coverage, or is it something that is only covered for unknown events that happen to you, right? You're traveling and there could be an accident that creates a medical emergency, or you just get sick, right? Flu, cold, you can't do that leg of the trip. So understand the difference there. If you want routine healthcare because you're on the road for 6 months and you want to get your diabetes medication or your asthma medication or whatever medication you might be on as a regular prescription that you fill, then you're not looking at travel insurance necessarily. You probably need to turn your gaze to an overseas medical health plan. And then also the question around, is it primary versus secondary coverage availability? That's also very important as well. Some plans are, if you get sick or you have an emergency and it's primary coverage, then you go ahead and just get that treatment and financial coverage and assistance based on that basis. In some cases, if it's secondary, insurance companies do what's called a coordination of benefits, that if it's secondary, they want to make sure that your primary health insurance provider doesn't cover that. And if they do, then what's the coverage that the maximum that they would pay out? And they coordinate with that insurance company to say, right, this is a $50,000 medical evac. Your healthcare company, your health insurer at home does cover that, but only up to 10,000. Then great, you get that first 10,000 covered. The secondary insurance provider, in this case, the travel insurer, will then pick up the baton of that case and look at your coverages and your claim based on being a secondary provider to see if they cover that 11,000 or $10,000 and $1 to the $50,000 limit, right? So there's coordination of benefits, primary versus secondary. And if you don't have primary insurance, then that's something that it'll default to a secondary, typically. I always say at this stage, make sure if you have a particular scenario that is particularly on your mind and personal to you, read the benefits, read the plan before you buy, and then call the customer service line to say, hey, it's me and my wife and my teenage kid. We're going to this destination. Here's my concerns. How do I look at this plan to see what I'm covered for? Let them help you to answer those questions.
Thanks, Christina. I guess on that note, one important thing to also keep in mind is specifically with that comparison of different categories of travel insurance, a credit card versus add-on, and standalone plans, you might find that one is suitable for one trip that you're taking, say this month, and then another trip that you have in a few months, you want different type of coverage. And that's totally fine. Myself as a traveler, I found that I do kind of weave in and out of different types of travel insurance depending on the trips that I'm taking and the destinations I'm going to and the activities that I'm going to participate in. All right, so we'll get into our traveler scenarios. We have a few different scenarios to go through. And Christina will kick off with a hurricane scenario.
Thank you. So yes, so I sort of gave you a little bit of foreshadowing on the hurricane piece. Let's say you're going to Puerto Rico, it's hurricane season, your travel dates are June 1st through 7th, for example. You made your deposit on that trip back in December or early January. You booked it on January 1st, and you buy your insurance on January 2nd. So 1 week before you're supposed to go on your departure, this is Hurricane Harry. So the week before, that last week in May, for example, a hurricane is declared before his departure date. That hurricane is reported to be impacting where he's going, specifically Puerto Rico. What's covered? So what's that could potentially be doing some inventory. He purchased his insurance right after he booked his trip January 2nd. Tick. He had a full 6 months before he actually went on that trip, or 5 months. So he has a nice long runway that helps him get that coverage before the hurricane was named. He was already covered. So because of that, the benefits that he would be entitled to would include a trip cancellation or a trip interruption if his destination is considered unsuitable for visitors. That, Puerto Rico was decimated. There's no way he could possibly go. There's massive disruptions to his ability to even get there. So his possible outcomes could be around a refund for those non-refundable parts of the trip. In many instances, you do have some refund of deposits from your airline or your travel provider. So insurance will come in to pick up the rest. Another call out with insurance, it's not intended to have you double up on your benefits. Insurance is intended to make you whole. So if you lost $100 because of this hurricane and your trip provider gives you $50 refund, then the difference is $50. Even if your trip benefit or your travel insurance benefit is $100, your goal is to be recompensated and made whole for that $100 loss, not to get 100 from insurance and 50 from your provider and come out ahead. That's the intention there. From another possible benefit that Harry might get is trip delay. So if in this exceeding 6 hours, that's how we define a trip delay. Heads up, not all insurance plans, they define trip delay very differently in terms of the amount of time that must pass before that benefit kicks in. In our case, it's 6 hours. So a possible outcome could be that Harry is covered for any additional hotels, lodging, taxis, ride shares, food, snacks that he might have to incur while he's waiting for that flight to get back on track. So some of the things that we put on our website around what you might want to think about from a travel wiser perspective is, as I mentioned before, book your travel insurance once you invest in your trip. Hurricane Harry did that. He got some coverages on the back of this incident. You can't purchase your travel insurance and receive coverage for a hurricane after it is named. When you're planning your trips, be aware, this seems stating the obvious, but be aware of some seasonal weather patterns that could impact your travel. There's some insurance companies that will price your travel insurance based on where in America you are. because all those actuaries know in the winter, if you're in Minnesota, they kind of know what happens in the winter time. So they will price based on place and time departure. We don't do that, but just a fun fact for those folks that some insurance companies do it that way. If you're caught in a storm, stay inside and always away from windows and doors. Always pay attention to what the government advisories in your local area are telling you. If you go afoul of those advisories, it could actually impact any claim should you then get into further stickiness and events and situations as a result of not paying attention to government advisories. You can't put yourself intentionally in harm's way and go against what the government might be telling you in this particular situation. And then conserve your battery power and travel with an external charger because you never know when you're going to get the lights turned back on. So always think about your ability to be contacted and to contact folks sparingly.
Thanks, Christina. All right, I'm going to go into the next scenario. This one is more adventure activity related. So we have skiing Sally. She booked a 2-week trip to Japan to go skiing. She's an avid skier and was becoming more and more confident as she was skiing every day on her trip. But a weekend, she took a bad tumble on the slope. She sustained some injuries from the fall. So what is covered in this kind of scenario? So she did have a World Nomads travel insurance plan and non-insurance services that come along with it. So she was able to get assistance. So the first benefit here that she took advantage of was the 24/7 emergency assistance line. So this line is available anytime, anywhere, and she was able to call them and get assistance in terms of what to do next in this kind of scenario. So they're able to help her get to the nearest hospital that could help her with her medical needs. So this assistance line is available 24/7. And there's actually operators that are able to translate as well. So this could be, really useful, especially when you're traveling abroad in a place like Japan, where maybe, English might not be spoken at certain hospitals, depending on what city or town you're in. So a tip for using this line, be ready with your plan number, contact information in case there's any kind of disconnection and the operator needs to call you back. And of course, just background around what is happening, what's the nature of the emergency, what's the location. That's going to help streamline the next steps in terms of getting Sally or you to where you need to be. So Sally makes it to the hospital, the nearest hospital, and now her emergency medical coverage kicks in. So this offers a wide range of coverage for accident and sickness medical expenses, such as hospitalization, any x-rays that need to be done, lab tests, prescribed medicines, ambulance transportation, and more. As Christina's already mentioned, the coverage is specific to emergency situations that are unexpected. And it does not cover routine medical or dental care abroad. So in this situation, it was not expected that she was going to get injured on the slopes. So she does get coverage for these kind of benefits while she's in the hospital. Emergency evacuation is another benefit. We hope that this is not necessarily the case for our travelers, but we know that it does happen in some circumstances. So if deemed medically necessary and approved by the assistance team that is assisting Sally, they could arrange for transport to get her to a medical facility or back home for further treatment. So these are in pretty extreme situations where maybe she's not able to get the medical care that she needs in that specific location or needs to go back home for some reason. So in terms of the travel wiser tips for planning this kind of, adventure-driven trip or just being prepared for these kind of scenarios abroad, again, it's important to note that routine healthcare and care back home are not covered. It's really just the emergency medical care that you have at that specific destination that's aligned with your policy. Important to check adventure activity coverage and exclusions. World Nomads does cover over 250 for US residents. But again, it's not necessarily the standard across all insurers. Always check weather before heading out. And if you are going skiing or participating in some type of mountain exploration, prepare for altitude sickness, dress in layers, hydrate before and during, and use sunscreen because it is very possible to get burnt on the slopes. If you're driving in the snow, use snow tires, four-wheel drive, and pack an emergency kit with you. And if you're renting a car, just make sure that you're asking the right questions and that it's equipped for the weather and terrain. Note that there are some vehicle types that may be excluded from travel insurance plans with travel insurance plans that have coverage for rental car damage. And moving into our last scenario here, so we have Baggage Betty. Baggage Betty is a big shopper. She decided to take a solo trip to France and was having a wonderful time just taking her all of her time for shopping and exploration. Um, when she was coming back from shopping, she was taking the metro back to her hotel. Her purse and shopping bags were swiped, and they took a bag of clothes she bought. It was worth 1,000 USD, her credit card, cash, and iPhone. So, what is covered? So she did have a travel insurance plan with World Nomads that included non-insurance services. So she was able to get assistance. And again, the first thing that she did here, similar to Skiing Sally, was called a 24/7 emergency assistance line. So when this kind of event happens, it can be really shocking. It could be confusing to know what to do next. So again, this isn't necessarily an emergency medical situation, but it is an emergency situation. We understand that this is very upsetting for any of our travelers. And so this line can help oh, Betty get information on what to do for next steps in this kind of situation. So they would likely recommend she go to a police station and file a police report within 24 hours. And it's important to keep all receipts and documents for when it's time to file a claim. Um, World Nomads plans do come with coverage for lost, delayed, or stolen baggage. So since her bags were stolen, she could get benefits and be paid out to the maximum limit dependent on her policy for the stolen baggage that was taken for her. So items covered include tech gear, devices, cameras, stolen passports, IDs, clothes, and toiletries. So she would get coverage for some of those items that were taken from her on the metro. Depreciation is considered for tech and devices, so just keep that in mind. If you have a brand new iPhone versus an iPhone that was purchased 5 or 6 years ago, the payout is going to be different. And it's important to note with this baggage coverage that there are certain exclusions. So if you accidentally leave your bag unattended, or you lose something, or if it's unattended, you wouldn't be covered. If you are traveling with professional equipment, high value items, or even some items like eyeglasses, sunglasses, hearing aids, and retainers, they wouldn't be covered. Cash is also not covered. So even though Betty did have some cash taken from her during that incident, it's something that she would not be able to be reimbursed for. So in terms of travel wiser tips, prepping for any trips that you're taking, whether it's solo, with family, friends, a good tip is always to password protect devices and enable lock screen. This is something that, is helpful in everyday life, not just while you're traveling. Similarly, enabling location tracking on your devices can really help to streamline and keep track of where your device may have gone, whether it's just losing it at your house, maybe underneath a couch cushion, or actually seeing it play out in a situation like Betty did and have it stolen on a metro. Secure your valuables in your accommodation and carry the bare minimum in a day pack when you do go out for those daily shopping sprees or adventures. Consider an RFID wallet or card sleeves, and as much as you can, try to use ATMs inside banks to avoid skimmers that might be put on the outside. Research your destination beforehand to understand if the preference is strongly in favor of cash or card. A lot of destinations are really preferring card. I've noticed, especially European destinations, so it might be a good idea to get that information beforehand so you don't take out cash or have that additional risk with you. And last tip here is just to travel with a printed itinerary, insurance coverage details, and I would even say printed copies of documents like your passport or ID and credit card in case anything does get stolen while you're on your trip. All right, and quickly, I'll just do an introduction to World Nomads Travel Insurance. So, we are a global travel insurance and lifestyle brand for adventurous, long-term, and truly epic journeys. What makes us unique? We offer adventure armor for travelers. So, award-winning travel insurance. We've been pioneering global protection for over 20 years now. And we are very passionate about making positive change when we travel. Through the Footprints programs, our travelers can support local communities. When they buy a travel insurance policy with us, they can choose to add a micro donation and support different projects that are working towards the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. We also have a revenue share program through our affiliate program. So you can earn revenue, receive performance incentives for generating affiliate quotes. As Christina alluded to earlier, we have a lot of travel content, inspiring, educating, and ultimately preparing travelers for unforgettable journeys. So, any of the FAQs or travel safety tips that you're interested in, we do have a lot of content on our site to help out with planning those journeys. We offer creator opportunities, once in a lifetime opportunities and partnerships for budding content creators, and also community perks. So, travel opportunities, gear prizes, partner discounts offered to our nomads. If you're interested in that, you can sign up for our newsletter, as often that's where we're promoting a lot of those kind of opportunities. And with that, I'll kick it over to Q&A.
Hi again, everybody. Um, I'm back. Okay, so we only got 12 minutes now, so we'll try to get to these questions as quickly as possible. So I'll try to keep my ums to myself. Okay, so I'm going to start at the top of the chat and just kind of go down the list. Let's see. Okay. Okay, this is a question about add-on stuff that was about flights and Airbnb. I will say though, don't get those add-on insurances because remember that um, they're not insurance companies, so their primary mission is not to do travel insurance, right? So you get added coverage from Airbnb or Delta Airlines or whatever. They are outsourcing that. So it's better to go with a company like World Nomads, whose primary job is to take care of you through that. Same with credit card companies. Like they do cover stuff as Tara said, but they're banks, not travel insurance companies. Um, Frank asked, what does trip delay insurance cover? So if one of you wants to take that.
Yeah, I could take that one. So trip delay covers travelers if specifically in World Nomads policies for US residents, it would kick in if your trip is delayed for 6 hours or more. So say you're at the airport and you find out that your flight was delayed for 8 hours. You might then be in a situation where you weren't expecting to stay the night at an airport hotel. You have additional costs because you need to take a taxi to and from that hotel. And then you also have additional costs with like food. So trip delay would pay for those kind of additional costs because of the delay with, say, your airline. I guess it's important to note that trip delay does not necessarily cover you for the airline cost. The expectation would be that the airline is putting you on a new flight in after that 6 hour period. But the costs that a travel insurance company would be more those additional costs that are accumulating because of the delay.
He asked, can you get reimbursed for the same medical emergency from oh, this is a good question on double dipping. Because I think we've talked about this before about how travel insurance makes you whole, right? It's not extra. So if can you get reimbursed by a credit card company and a travel insurance policy? I mean, the answer is no, but I'll let them explain that.
Yeah, so that speaks to the double dipping piece. Yeah, if whatever you're claiming for with your credit card company and they cover it, and then you'd make the same claim with your insurance provider, then that is double dipping. And what sometimes happens with claims is they will verify with not the credit card company necessarily, but with the airline. If there were reparations made as a result of that airline-driven incident, and then they will looking at the difference. So if you do that, then you're not supposed to, and it's your decision as to how you want to handle your claim. But the goal for insurance is not to have you be make to get extra couple of $100 on top of the financial loss that you incurred from that particular incident. So that's double dipping.
Alex asks, regarding hurricanes, what if there is a hurricane at the beginning of my trip near my departure airport? Is that covered? So I guess rather
Well,
than with where you're going, but where you are.
right, and that depends on whether it is considered uninhabitable and no planes are leaving from that airport. That's where you need to call the insurance company and find out what's going on. Are planes leaving? Am I going to get rerouted will the airline give me a reroute? So that's all very situational. And if that is a question you have, particularly if you're departing from Florida, which is one of the top places where hurricanes occur and could prevent you from leaving from your departure point, that's a question that you want to get specificity on with the insurance company. But if you bought your insurance in advance of the hurricane being named and you cannot by any means depart, even with alternate arrangements, then that would be a conversation to have at the claims point of your coverage.
Okay, Sandra asks, does the travel insurance cover car rental accident insurance?
You want to take that one, Tara? I can answer it if you want.
Uh, yeah, I think if you can answer that one.
Yeah, so it depends on which plan you purchase. So again, some plans have collision damage waiver coverage, so and up to a certain limit. So that's going to be very dependent on the plan and the insurer that might have it on the plan. So zero in on that part of the policy. World Nomads doesn't have that coverage in our standard plan, but it kicks in for the Explorer and the Epic plan, and it's up to a limit. But there's also exclusions too. So if you're driving a very expensive Maserati, if you're renting a Maserati or some monster truck, there are certain types of vehicles that are excluded from that coverage.
Karen asks, where can I get information on annual travel insurance? Well, you guys have a policy, and I've written a blog post on it. So, Karen, I will send that blog post um, in the notes coming tomorrow so that you can just read in detail um, my thoughts on that and information about their policy, um, just for the sake of time. Okay, a lot of comments here about how you only cover up to 70. And people are asking who covers after 70. So I will just simply say I have a blog post on that too, and it lists a bunch of people. Um, there's a lot of insurance companies in the world, and who you go for is more about what kind of trip you're taking. So if you are above World Nomad's age cutoff, I'll send the list in that too, and then you can take a look at a bunch of places and pick the best for you.
Yeah, we also have, if you enter your age, and you age out of our normal plans, we give a referral also to send you to a Silver Nomads page, which then gives you some options there that you can click across to another provider as well.
Yeah, so they have their recommendations too. So, um, here's a question from Tammy. I'm 62, healthy and walking the Camino. I'm looking for ER care and ER evacuation if needed. Is it possible to purchase just this coverage?
Those
So,
plan. Oh, go ahead, Tara. Go ahead. Go,
oh,
go.
yep, I was going to say it is possible. Christina had mentioned there are some travel insurers that offer emergency medical care only. World Nomads does not have a product that only uh, parses out that specific coverage. We have bundled plans. So all of our plans include emergency medical, emergency evacuation, but it also comes with coverage for like trip cancellation, trip interruption, baggage, and other benefits. So I don't have a specific recommendation if you're only looking for those benefits, but yes, you can find something. You could do a quick search online and find different kind of offerings.
Yeah, I would recommend going to Insure My Trip or Square Mouth, where you can look at post-departure medical only types of coverage plans.
Okay, we have a. Oh, I don't know. Okay, IMG just announced it acquired World Nomads. Um, what will be changing? Will the brands be merging? Um, second, how long is the average wait from submitting a claim to payout? What is important pay work to keep in case you need to submit a claim? Those are two good.
Okay. Yep, I'll address those. So forgive me if I'm rushing, but I know we're 3 minutes left. So yes, IMG did just announce that we are going to be acquired. There is an agreement in place for the World Nomads brand to be part of the IMG family. Nothing is expected to change in terms of coverages, underwriters, or the World Nomads brand. They acquired us for a reason, and that's because the World Nomads brand is very distinct in the marketplace, and of course, they want to make sure that they're supporting that and continuing to invest and grow in the World Nomads as a brand. In terms of the average wait time, so we have streamlined our claims process with TripMate, who is our TPA. And from when you submit, let's assume you've submitted everything correctly, all the paperwork that's required and asked of you, then there should be and from adjudication to the claims adjudication to a decision should be around 10 to 15 business days. If, however, they have a follow-up question and says, well, what about this? What about that? What about that? Then it's as long as you make it in terms of your ability to reply and provide the documentation or answer the questions that they're asking of you. Important paperwork, proof of loss, proof of ownership. Those are the things that they're looking for most. So if you have receipts of things, Tara already mentioned that, keep that. Always get a copy of a police report. Always get all the documentation from a hospital or medical professional that you've been seen to. Keep all the paperwork that you have at hand.
Great. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, here's a good question. Sarah asks, I'm a single parent starting to travel internationally with my 11-year-old. Would travel insurance help take care of him if I am incapacitated in any way?
Great question. Look in the plan, but there are provisions in many plans for traveling minors that are traveling with you. And is there another adult that can come and take them home, or can they be attended to while you might be in the hospital? There are coverages for those very scenarios around traveling with young minors on your plan. It depends on the provider. Read that part of the policy wording to figure out if that's something that covers you. We cover that to certain scenarios, so have a look at that as well to make sure you're comfortable. If you're not comfortable, call the customer service line, present your scenario.
Yeah, you always want to read the fine print. And then if you read the fine print and you're still confused, definitely call. Um, most complaints about travel insurance that you see online are people complaining that they didn't get coverage that is not included in their policy. They just made the assumption that it was and then didn't read the fine print. I get these emails all the time. So such and such company didn't do this. Like, what should I do? And I'm like, okay, well, did you read the policy? No. Okay, I read their policy. And I'm like, yeah, you should have read the policy. It's not covered. Here's the highlight. So definitely always read the policy. Um, Lucy asks how to buy insurance as soon as possible. Oh, here's a good one. I don't actually understand this question. How to buy insurance as soon as possible. I don't know exactly the days. Okay, well, I can't understand that, so I'm going to look at some of these other ones.
While
Um,
you're while you're doing that, I just want to address Regina's comment around medical evacuation
and
policies.
that's where I was just going to go to next. So, like,
Yeah.
take it away.
So again, MedJet, I think, is a subscription service. So you or a subscriber versus a policy holder. So if if the traveler gets to make the call in terms of like, get me out of here, then that's part of the discussion or part of the plan and subscription you have with MedJet. When it comes to World Nomads and how we work with our medical emergency providers or medical evacuation providers, is you have to be stable and fit for travel. So even if you want to get out of that hospital tomorrow, if you're not fit for travel, our attending physicians will make sure that you are stable enough to then make the next transition towards your next port of call, whether it be to a bigger hospital or to repatriate you at home. So that's the difference. Customer gets to make the call. Sometimes that might not be the best thing. We rely on our medical professionals to be making sure that there's stability and safety for the traveler.
Cool. I'm gonna field this last question from Lucy, and then we're wrapping up. I think Lucy's question is: I paid the deposit for a trip, but I don't have flights yet. So when should I buy travel insurance? If you already know when you're going, you should buy now because it doesn't matter if you buy before or after it's better to buy before anything. If you know you're leaving March 1 to March 10th, buy the policy now.
If you
Right.
don't know the exact dates, just you have to make that call. Let's do I want to leave earlier than that start date of day one? That's your call, and you just get the dates that sort of give you enough buffer that you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I always usually start my policy like if I let's say I'm leaving on March 1st, I'll start it like February 27th, just in case, there's a flight change or I decide to leave a day earlier or something. And then I usually end it like a day after, just so there's always a buffer, you know.
Yeah.
Can never be too sure. It's always like life, it's good to have a buffer. So
Yeah. And sorry, just on that note, in terms of getting a quote with World Nomads, it is pretty simple. You need your trip dates, your destination, your age, country of residence, state of residence. We don't take your deposit date. I know some other deposit amount or trip cost amount. So if you don't have that information, it's fine. You could still get a quote and purchase with World Nomads.
great. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up. If you have any questions that we didn't get to or think of some later, just shoot me an email. And always you can go to World Nomads customer service and ask them or their website. So again, tomorrow you will get an email of this presentation as well as relevant links that we just talked about. So yeah. With that, y'all have a good night, or well, it's a night for me, but have a good day. And we'll chat later. So long.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks
Matt.
again, Tara and
Thank
Christina,
you.
for presenting too. So give them a round
Thanks,
of
everyone.
applause.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.